at the dinner hour on the other
Yep.
side of the pond, and I appreciate you carving out time. Um, your book, I came across natural intelligence, and it was one of those moments where I had been struggling for years to find language frameworks, just someone else that had been really thinking about how might nature inform us to think about how we solve problems in a different way. And it's got a PhD in solving problems. It's been doing it
Mhm.
for 3 billion years. And so when I had the chance to meet you, I just thought, hey, this is someone we could learn from, and you have been helping us learn as we go. But also, might there be a way that we could just lift up the kind of conversation that you and I would be having for others to be able to listen in and participate with? But the one thing I don't think I ever had a chance to ask you yet is what sparked your interest to even get involved in biology and the natural world? Like, how did that come about?
Um, Good question. I think it's one of the first times that someone actually asked me that question. What sparked it? I think as soon as I could walk, I was already mesmerized and fascinated by the living world, especially animals. I thought they were so ingenious and so beautiful, and so it just drew me because there was this quality and this energy in the natural world that I did not find at school. And so I guess I would have to say it kind of came natural to me. There was this, yeah, this deep fascination about all the things that are not human, and how well designed and developed and how intelligent
Yeah.
those living forms actually are. So that would be my answer.
Is there a person in your life that really altered your course on really pursuing the natural world? Was there an individual that your life intersected with that just made you say, I actually now need to begin to think about this differently?
Well, at the beginning, there were my grandparents who always had a very special relationship with nature. One of my grandfathers was a fisher, the other one was a birder, and they had or was into birding. And they had like this love for nature and being outside, and I guess genetically that kind of came with my genetics too. Um, and then I guess one of the really big aha moments to me came when I followed the course Regenerative Development and Design, which is given by the institute, American Institute that's called Regenesis, and by Pamela Meng and Ben Haggard. And they really opened my eyes to the potential that is actually in living systems. And they also helped me really understand that how we have been designing our organizations, and a lot of our businesses and even institutions is from a worldview, a mechanical worldview, like the organization as a machine. The employees are as automatons that just have to do tasks. But that's not how living systems work, right? Living systems always have this inherent quality to be able to grow into new potential, into new capabilities, and to evolve with their surrounding evolving environments. And I guess after my parents, my grandparents, this course that I took with those people from Regenesis, with whom I'm still collaborating very much, Yes, really opened a whole new world to me. I already knew how intelligent nature was because I have been trained as a biologist. But how this can actually help the world move forward, that really crystallized when I got into contact with the discipline of regenerative development.
Mm.
Just on this, on how your thought process is evolving. One thing I know that has been of real interest to us, we're interested on this intersection of natural intelligence, basically how might the helping system, could be government, could be nonprofits, could be corporations for that matter. What might we learn from the way that the natural living systems have learned over 3 billion years that we could draw upon and begin to utilize and in many ways move away from this
Mhm.
industrial model. I know you've begun to do quite a bit of work with leaders inside of organizations, leaders who are coming to a place recognizing that they can't actually the tools that they reach for, the mechanical tools they reach for, aren't meeting the match of the complexity of the problem that they're facing. And I think they arrive at a place of an openness that maybe there's a better way, or maybe there's something that, I need to be more open to. I'm just curious, as you have begun to work with leaders, what is the maybe what is a way that you've helped them bridge even their own thinking from an industrial model to a more of a living system model? And what are some of maybe the first steps that we have many on this call that are leading very complex systems,
Mhm.
often can feel stuck, and maybe just even one kind of step that you think some folks ought to consider?
Good question. Well, one of the first things that I do is ask the leaders to go outside and really immerse themselves in nature for a while to quiet this really busy monkey brain that keeps thinking and that keeps wanting to tick off boxes, and just go there and just be still and observe and let it come to you. I think that is a really important one to be able to take a pause from the rat race world where there's so much to do in so little time. The second thing that I work on, something I learned from my mentors at Regenesis, is to really think about where is our thinking coming from? Which paradigms are informing the way that you view the world? And are those paradigms still valid and appropriate in today's world? Because much of what we think today still comes from this worldview of humans being separate from nature and humans being superior to nature. It also comes from what I call a Cartesian reductionism, that we think we can know the whole if we know the parts. But
Mm.
science is actually overturning those things. So, to really become conscious about what is actually fueling my thinking, and is that still appropriate in today's world? You mentioned, Michael, that leaders often struggle with tools. Um, and that is actually no surprise, because what you often see that happens is that we try to use the old tools of the old world to measure how to make progress in the new world. But those tools have been designed to serve the old world. They have not been designed to serve a very new, radically new world. So sometimes it's also helping them build up the courage to let go of those tools,
Mm.
KPIs, and things that actually are not helping the people to move forward. they actually keep you locked in the old stage and in the old ways of doing things.
One thing that you mention is leaders finding courage. What is helping leaders find courage? Because this would be, there's so much pressure for leaders to show up with certainty.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have folks on the call that have to stand before a board, and it's not helpful for them to say, I don't know. And they have to, you know, bring a level of certainty forward. So it takes courage to begin to unlearn, is what I would call it. It's like
Indeed.
letting go, unlearning what maybe had been built in over 100 or 200 or 300 years, and have an openness to say, I actually can begin to learn a new way, and I can have a beginner's mind. And in that, I believe I might be able to steward or help a mission even better than what I'm able to do right now. But that letting go, that unlearning takes courage. What's something that you have seen or witnessed or experienced yourself that helps like grab that courage?
Well, I cannot speak for the other people, but I can speak for myself. It's once I really understand how living systems work, it really fueled my not only my motivation, but also my courage to change things around and do things completely differently. And I hope that is also when I work with the business leaders that I kind of can also like catalyze a little bit of this, because once you see how living systems operate, you see that there is a complexity to it that our linear models and our linear ways of thinking just cannot discern and understand. And least of all, really steer and create certainty. But once you know how living systems work, you can see where you can have impacts and how, as a leader, you can create conditions that are conducive for your employees to step up, to become better, to take more ownership, to take more responsibility. And so it's really understanding this how living systems work, that it's not linear, but that it's actually very decentralized. And the one of the learnings also here is that every living entity has an essence and a potential that can be unfolded. But the way we've been organizing our organizations keeps that potential locked in. What if you set that potential free? If an employee can grow into becoming his or her best self and do that in a way that actually not only serves that person, but serves the team, serves the organization, and even serves the bigger whole that the organization is nested in. Because I think one of the most important lessons, once you understand how living systems work or operate, is that every element takes direction from the bigger whole that it is nested in. An example that I often use when I'm talking to leaders or in my retreats is trying to image your body from the inside out, right? Trying to image how your cell is nested in a tissue, how that tissue is nested in an organ, how that organ is nested in an organ system, and how this again is nested inside your body. And then I asked them, how does your body work? What makes that your body works? And so it is that every small part adds value to the bigger part that
Yeah.
it is nested in. And when we forgot as humans that we are part of a bigger system, that's when actually everything started to degenerate and degrade. So taking direction from the bigger system that you're nested in. Yeah.
Mike,
It's, yeah.
we've even had like so many talks on nature, and I know that connection to nature has been a big influence on your work, especially a lot recently. I wanted to ask you, when did you begin to see nature as a teacher in your own work, especially in relation to public service and human-centered design?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And Leen, when you talked about being a young child, my mind immediately goes back to that, Elena, where I just grew up and behind me, I had these woods and I had a pond and I had a creek. And I spent a huge portion of my childhood back there just mucking around, just following my curiosity. But I was always struck that there is an elegance and there's something that is happening here that I don't understand and I can't see. And then you fast forward 60 years, you know, and I made a commitment to myself that I would spend dedicated time in a single river and just photograph it. And I would make sure I was there every month in the river. I would swim the river. I would walk the river. I would sit by the side of the river, study the river. And I'm now entering my fourth year on it's a very small river in Michigan. And I can't help but appreciate and grow my conviction that the elegance, the manner in which that wide ecosystem that's all tied into that single small river, fish, 31 species of fish, bird life, plant life, moss, lichen, all of that is moving and adapting every day in ways that we don't yet fully understand. We're growing our understanding. That's, in fact, why this conversation is happening, because there's an emergence of a new understanding of how these living systems work. And I remember being in the river and thinking, if this river is able to do with such ease and such grace over thousands of years, there has to be lessons in here for me as a leader and other leaders to say, maybe we don't know, all the tools right now that is needed. I have great confidence that AI is going to roll in. It'll provide benefit. It'll have some dangers to it. But I don't think there is anyone either on this call or maybe on this planet that would say any organization has over indexed on drawing lessons from nature. I think most would say we're underutilizing that really important asset. And our mission is to work with these public serving institutions. So when I have that kind of belief, that intuition, that insight, and just self-study, my natural inclination is, how might we begin to bridge the abundance of natural intelligence that's available to us to leaders who I think have some of the most difficult jobs on the planet and dealing with some of the greatest complexity, that maybe there is a way, there are learnings, there are analogous inspiration, and quite honestly, there's healing that could take place even for those leaders themselves as they got closer to nature, to be able to have the strength and persistence that's needed to carry out these missions. But it started when I was a very young kid with my dog back on a pond and back on a river and just following my curiosity. And later in life, I've tried to reactivate that and grow that and give myself permission to say, I don't know. And maybe one of the best ways I could help this larger aspiration that we have with our mission is to begin to understand something that's been at work for 3.8 billion years.
Love that. I wanted to read a question that we got in the chat, and definitely please expand if I don't cover everything that you're needing an answer to. What are some of the largest survival risks that we are not assessing correctly with respect to its impact? And part B of that question is, how can natural intelligence offer a different way at looking at these risks?
Sorry, is it risks or
Risks.
risks?
Mhm. What are some of the largest survival risks?
Risks. Well, I would say if you look at the survival champions, so the ones that actually manage to stay around for millions of years, there is a pattern that they all do. And that pattern is create conditions conducive to future life. And all the fossils did not do that, or they created conditions that were worse or harmful for future life. So bad for future life. So I think that is probably the most important lesson that we can learn from the species that have been around for such a long time.
One thing I would add on to that, it reminds me we recently were exploring some land in the city of Detroit, and there's this cottonwood tree on it, and it was out there standing. This is a barren lot, industrial lot. Once was a swamp 100 years ago, and now it's just a mowed place of weeds. But there's this cottonwood. And the cottonwood's there because there's still remnants of a swamp below, right? And this botanist that I was with began to describe it to me that one thing that cottonwood does is it has this huge abundance of both energy that it can produce and actually the movement of water through it. And it has this ability, like many surviving living things in living systems, as Leen was talking about, to be able to share its abundance. And I thought that was just such an interesting frame. Like this cottonwood tree takes its abundant energy and abundant water and disperses it among other things around it to create a stronger environment. So not only do they survive, but that those items are essential to the cottonwood's survival. And the question that she turned and asked, we had a group of leaders that run institutions there, is what is your abundance? What is it within you? And, so many of these are institutions, we feel quite scarce. We don't have enough resource. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough. But the question really get pushed more on, okay, that can be true, but what are you abundant in? And how might you share that to strengthen the ecosystem around you? So not only that they can thrive, but that in fact you would thrive in a greater way. And Leen, when you were describing that those that make it versus those that turn into fossils, my mind went to the cottonwood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very good example, Michael. In biology, we call them pioneers. So there's many pioneer species, and those are actually the ones that can withstand the harsh conditions and mobilize nutrients and energy for others to come in, right? So that is also, yeah, a very good example. Yeah.
Kind of on the same vein, Mike and I were talking about different questions we wanted to ask. And one was that in your book, you mentioned that fostering talent, curious and friendly employees might be the key to long-term organizational success and health. What has nature taught you about that?
And a good question. So for a very long time, our scientific discourse and even economic discourse has been influenced by the quote, survival of the fittest, which was actually not a quote from Darwin, but it was what his publicists made him put in there because it would sell more if he would put that in. Now, survival of the fittest is only one part of the story. Because the other part of the story is survival of the fittingest, the one that is the best attuned and evolving with its environment. And what we're now learning from biologists in the last decades is that actually it's not so much competition that created the abundance and the species richness that we can see on the earth today, but actually it's collaboration. We humans would not be here if single-celled organisms didn't learn to collaborate. We would not be here if our chromosomes would not collaborate and our genomes would not collaborate and our cells and organs would not collaborate. And the same actually applies for any living system and for ecosystems. So due to this phrase, the sketchy phrase of survival of the fittest, we've so much focused on competition as being a driving force of innovation. But that is actually now being overturned by biology, saying that it's actually the avoidance of competition that leads to innovation. And it is the abilities and the skills to collaborate that really give you a head start when it comes to surviving and thriving in the long term. And I came across a study on wolves that actually said humans did not domesticate wolves. Wolves domesticated themselves, which to me made much more sense. So I dived a little bit into the research, and it's actually so interesting. They actually discovered that, or the theory is that the friendly, the curious, and the tolerant wolves were the ones that stuck around humans more, while the scared wolves and the aggressive wolves, they actually stayed away from humans. They were either killed by humans or they were so afraid that they actually stayed away. Now, the friendly wolves developed into dogs, which are now man's best friends. And the non-friendly wolves were almost hunted into extinction. So that actually is really a good story, and it's actually a scientific study to show that actually what gets you ahead is being tolerant of differences, being curious, and being friendly, because then you can see the new pots of value adding that can be created when you start to collaborate. So that was the story of the wolves.
Leen, I'm wondering, and I'm sure you come across it all the time. I've already run into it as I've begun to socialize some of this thinking. And it could be folks on the line, I don't know, like, yeah, this is all lovely. I'm glad it works for wolves and that. But are there examples, one example or two, that have been applied in an organizational environment that you just say these kind of, and I know we're early in all this, but that it helps others begin to see that this path is possible? And are there one or two that come to mind for you that you think it would be helpful for this group to become aware about?
Well, what pops to mind is actually the work of Max Schutz. He also lives in America, and he's the former learning and organizational development head of Microsoft. And he's been helping organizations to really tap into that untapped potential. And he calls it growing the mind of a CAO in every employee. And he's published on LinkedIn, so you really have to check out his publications because he goes into much more detail, which I cannot give. because I wasn't involved in the project. But it's so powerful to see once you can shift your culture from a culture of competition to a culture of collaboration, to a culture of motivation, but also shared responsibility for the future of the firm, right? That really sets free a lot of creativity. And if you then have like a really good way of facilitating those internal processes, then your company just becomes better. It is a little bit trying to evolve or develop this distributed intelligence and distributed leadership in all your employees, instead of just having them do one task and not think about all the other effects. If we have to live in a very complex world, we have to learn the capabilities to work with that complexity. And there's no better way to do that than to have all your employees understand how complexity works and their part in it. So I would really advise to check the work, the publications of Max Good. He gives real examples. One is of T-Mobile, where he really helped this organization to organize themselves as a living system to unlock the untapped potential that they could grow in. Another tip that I would give is the work of Carol Sanford. I don't know if the listeners are familiar with it, but she has been working, I think, more than 30 years already in this field. And she's written a lot of books about it with a lot of examples, and also with a lot of like hardcore success impact factors that you can see that the company really did better after they implemented this kind of thinking and this kind of working.
Leen, what
A
was the
company
author's
that's
name?
worth I'm sorry, the name of the individual, Leen?
Carol Sanford.
Important.
Sanford.
Yeah, I was gonna add that one for those on the line, a movie called Beyond Zero is worth watching. And it's a story of one company over a 30-year period that made a big bet. They were in one of the most toxic industries, and to turn around the culture and the way in which they went about that over a 30-year period to become not just neutral but net positive in the world. And it's definitely worth watching. Beyond Zero, a documentary on that. Elena, I know we have some other questions from
Yeah,
folks.
and thanks everyone. Keep asking questions. We love answering them. Well, I'm not gonna answer them, but Mike and Lee will. Okay, so we have a question from Sarah. She asks, what can you share about how living systems design can work with and perhaps dismantle the existing limits of privilege and inequality in this current paradigm? This is an argument I often hear against regenerative design, that it has a blind spot for privilege and inequality.
Yeah, that's a tough question, and I think we're only now trying to figure out how to work with that. One of the ways that I try to do it is to bring in indigenous wisdom, not just taking their ideas, but really trying to do it in the most respectful way. I actually refer to indigenous wisdom as indigenous science, because to me, I've been trained in the scientific model, the Western scientific model, but if I read up on what indigenous peoples knew thousands of years ago, I would say their science is the most sophisticated and the most advanced. And what is really interesting about this time is that a lot of the Western technologies are actually proving what indigenous peoples knew for thousands of years. So they're actually proving that they were right. So trying to really bring in the perspective that is not only the Western perspective. And it is tricky, right? Because most of the leaders I work with are raised in the Western model. They don't challenge it. We don't think about what we do as colonialism, but that really is what we've been doing here in the Western world. So it is challenging, but what I try to do is bring in also these insights from indigenous peoples that everything has spirits. I remember someone told me that to the indigenous people of Colombia, stones are the wisest ones because they were here first. They are the oldest creatures on earth. And so this quote that I was actually taught by the people from Regenesis, which says, what we have to do now is spiritualize material and materialize spirits. That is so spot on to me, to the way that we have to try to design in a way that is inclusive and in a way that is fair. But we're still very small steps in that direction. So I think we'll have to figure that out while we're doing it. And hopefully we can do that in a collaborative way.
Yeah, one thing I would say, that's Sarah's question is one that is heavy on my mind around this, and there's one of the reasons why I'm very interested in just learning more from the natural systems is nothing takes in the living system, nothing takes more than it needs.
Mm-hmm.
And it understands that it's very, very important. Or if you do, you tend not to survive because then you deteriorate your environment. And that just strikes me as a $3 billion lesson that has been very hard for us to accept and come by, particularly with a Western industrial model. But if we begin to make greater understanding of how living systems work, draw on lessons from thousands of years of indigenous culture, and begin to find pathways, examples, and proof points that people can take and understand. And again, we're in the very, very early stages of this. I think we have a shot at having the lessons of living systems of nature and this natural intelligence play a greater and greater role to help bring a more equitable society. Because you in that future state, nothing would be over consuming it, and if it does, it wouldn't survive.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for both of you, but when it comes to continuing this work and really starting to think about this, especially as leaders and maybe potentially designers that may be on the call, what is one good practical next step for learning more about this or incorporating it into our own work? There's so many ways we could go, but would love if you all could think of maybe a practical step for all of us.
A practical step. Well, I think I shared them already in the beginning. Like, first, go out and quiet your mind. Just observe and try to tune in to nature, because we have been so unplugged from the living systems that actually support us. So plug back into nature. That would be my first advice. And then the second one is really think about what makes your body work. Think about what makes living systems work. Those systems that have been able to survive and thrive for 3.8 billion years. because there really is the intelligence that we need right now. And when I talk to you about the example of our body, how our cell is nested in a tissue, is nested in an organ, is nested in an organ system, is nested in a body. Well, the specific process that makes your body work is that every element adds value to the bigger thing it is nested in, the bigger hole it is nested in. So this value adding in nested systems, that is, I think, a really important one for organizations. How can your employees add value to your organization, but also how can your organization add value to the landscape in which it is embedded? And the more you understand how living systems operate, the more you will see that health is not in the parts, it is in the whole. But intelligence is in the parts. So how can you nurture both the health of the whole and the intelligence of the parts? So that would be my 2 cents for starting.
Mine would be yeah, be close to nature. And I wouldn't put that as then I need to embark out to a national park. I mean, if you can, wonderful, or that. I would say, like, my father taught me, I'd take him on walks when he was 95, and we'd go by and he'd point at a blade of grass and he says, there's miracles happening right there, and we don't even understand how that's happening. So my point is, I don't think we need to go far to be in and around nature, and that would be, I think, really important. Something that I have been trying to do is when I'm wrestling with a problem, I try to just pull back and just say, I wonder how nature wrestles with this type of problem. And so you kind of like broaden that problem out a little bit. I mean, give it the characteristics and begin to see how nature wrestles with that, whether you land on something or not. But just even that process has you observing nature more, which grows your muscle on just understanding and deepening things. The other thing I would encourage folks is I would read Leen's book. I think that's one thing that folks could do. And she's probably blushing that I'm saying this, but it's I just think it's someone that has worked really hard just to say, I want to understand this, and I want to find a way to put it into words that others can have it. And her book, and if it doesn't provoke your thinking and encourage you to take further steps in it, I'd be shocked.
That's awesome. We have one more question in our chat. Leen, to the point that you were making of some of the practical steps you were sharing with us, how do you prevent organizations from being exploitive to that concept, missing the bigger picture of your message?
Well, I don't think I can prevent that per se. I hope that the leaders, the future leaders, will get such a deep sense of the future that is at stake and also their potential in helping us get back on track instead of going towards collapse. And I do try, if I'm working with an organization and with the leaders, or if I'm facilitating a retreat, to really speak to that deeper level of awareness and consciousness, but also show them. The funny thing is, since I started to do this work, I've had so many people come up to me and say, can I please come and work for you? People that say like, oh, you are shining it's like there's light in your eyes, and I want to feel that same thing again. And for me, it's because I'm plugged in into nature. She is revitalizing and re-energizing and regenerating myself. And nature also speaks to us, communicates, but we've forgotten to understand her messages. Maybe just a small example to end with. 2 weeks ago, we found a lifeless kitten on the roads. It was almost dead, like no light, no pupils in her eyes. She was severely malnourished, just skin and bones, covered in ticks and fleas. Uh, but when I opened the door of the car, she made one loud meow. And that told me, like, okay, I don't think she's ready to give up. So we picked her up. We drove 40 minutes to our vet just to be told, like, okay, that cat is dead. There's no point in saving it. And at that exact same time, the cat made a meow again. She could not move, but she could still make a sound. So I thought, okay, I think the life spirit and the life force in this little kitten is not ready to give up. So I told the vet, save her, I will pay. And 1.5 days later, the vet called me and she said, you can come and pick her up. And now she's running around here, healthy, restored. And it was for me a really good lesson that with care and attention, even when things look really, really grim, if you give it enough care and attention, you can bring it back to health.
Wow.
Leen, I really appreciate you being with us. And I appreciate you being on the journey. The journey that you're on took courage. You created an organization when there really weren't any around, to help others learn and develop in that. And we appreciate you carving out time today to help share your wisdom.
Yes.
Thank you so much also for the opportunity. It was a real pleasure to talk with you guys.
Yes. And thank you everyone for coming. I know this is definitely a unique talk, and it's a privilege for us to bring this conversation to you all. And would love for you to stay in touch with us. We are continuing to just bring different events to connect with Civilla. So I'm going to drop a link for our next tour that we do in our studio with Mike. And if you're interested in just learning more about human-centered design and concepts like this, please join that. We have a couple more spots left. But thank you all for joining today, and I hope you get out in nature.
Thanks, Elena.
Thank you.
And thank you all. We appreciate it. And Leen, again, thank you. Be well.
Thank you all.
Enjoy some dinner.
Will
Bye.
do. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Yeah, bye-bye.